Hello and welcome back, everyone. I am here. I made a promise I was going to get my life together, and here we are, excited and ready to get into another fashion designer deep dive with you today. But before we begin, if you're new here, welcome. My name is Lolly, and I make videos about fashion designers and their work. So if you like fashion, talking about fashion, or simply interested in knowing more about certain fashion designers, their life, and their work, and how it all seemingly connects, then this is definitely the place for you. So welcome. And we are here today with another fashion designer deep dive, and this one is going to be so good, I promise. I've chosen a relatively new designer, and I'm so excited to talk about her. She is a designer that I've been following for the last few years, and her growth and her work has had me in a chokehold. And today, I hope you can see why. Because today, we are going to be talking about the alt-goth queen, Miss Dilara Findikoglu. A designer that is real, raw, and outspoken. Despite growing up in a very conservative Muslim household in Turkey, she made a name for herself as a fashion designer in London. Her otherworldly occult designs have left people spellbound, because the work is dreamy, eternal, and anarchic. And while her work might seem like it's for the punks, goths, and corpse brides, she manages to translate and balance her interest with genuinely beautiful work. And it works. It works because Dilara is always willing to take the risk. She doesn't care for convention or trends. Her focus is on creating work that matters, believing that if you're not cringing by your own work, then you're playing it too safe. You must question the system. To stand by work and have it mean something, you have to be willing to be yourself, to put yourself out there. Because if you don't, it's all meaningless. With her saying if someone starts a brand nowadays and if they don't talk about making the world a better place or saving the planet or doing ethical things, if they just want to produce hundreds of the same t-shirts made out of the most awful polyester, then it means absolutely nothing to me. If I'm going to make something, it has to say something about the world and make the world a better place, because doing fashion for fashion is a bit old school. The world is not that kind of place anymore. If you don't want to talk about politics, at least don't be wasteful. That's the number one thing. Our world is a bit dangerous and difficult. I can't just ignore what is happening and make beautiful clothes. I think it's important to put what's happening in the world behind the beautiful clothes I'm making. Dilara's work is informed by her upbringing. They are an extension of who she is, a woman who drinks Americanos and is obsessed with the color red, collecting vintage Alea and Mugler, and an avid Victorian clothing collector who likes to wear clothes that have a soul, a story even.
I collect like Victorian tops. I like that imperfections on things when it's like worn too much, but it has that beauty of like past lives to it.
And that is why her work is so personal and meaningful. It's inspired by the countless hours she spent researching spirituality, parapsychology, aliens, other dimensions, and fantasies. A girl who taught herself everything she knows, discovering her own taste in music, how to dress, the best ways to be herself, and the best things for her. She isn't about just making pretty clothes. It's about her story, her background, her world. A world made by and for Dilara Findikoglu, who isn't afraid to speak up about issues affecting the world. A woman who is outspoken about gender injustice, feminism, and the suffering of child brides, who even staged a seance to call for an end to the climate crisis. With Dilara saying, "My will to fight for ideals comes from my father. Where I see fairness, I try to bring positivity. I find it stimulating to bring out subjects that are uncomfortable in fashion. I want to break the rules and show what is not necessarily pretty. People like to be quiet about most things, but I would like to save the world by breaking the old rules." A woman determined, who made her own path, who has never taken no as an answer, but who spent much of her childhood an outsider who didn't belong. And yet, even today, she has no interest in following society's rules or adhering to the expectations of her as a woman. A girl who did anything she could to escape the reality of her strict conservative Muslim childhood. However, let's not get it confused. Her Muslim upbringing has inspired much of her work. Her home country of Turkey has also been a major source of inspiration. Dilara Findikoglu hopes her work will inspire those whose hearts and minds are open to learning more, discovering new ideas, and hearing different perspectives. And today, I want to welcome you all to a place where the weirdos and the outcasts are held to the holiest. Welcome to the world of Dilara Findikoglu.
My name is Dilara Findikoglu and I'm from Turkey, Istanbul.
Dilara Findikoglu was born September 5, 1990 in Istanbul, Turkey. Despite growing up in a big city like Istanbul, Dilara was raised in a very strict, conservative Muslim household by parents who grew up in Kayseri, a small city near the Taurus Mountains. Born of a different generation whose attitude towards women could feel alienating, Dilara felt at odds with her surroundings and by her father's high expectations of her. but from an early age, she rebelled. At 2 years old, she started sketching outlines of female figures on the family's living room walls, and by her primary and middle school years, she started immersing herself into the world of fiction, reading books like Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, and the Chronicles of Narnia. By the time she was a teenager, she was watching horror movies like Cannibal Holocaust that inspired her new world, and reading books like Chariots of the Gods by Eric von Däniken. At 14 years old, she became obsessed with Alice in Wonderland, dressing like her and even dyeing her hair and eyebrows red to look more doll-like. But it wasn't long before she moved on to reading books about the paranormal, dyeing her hair black, and swapping out doll-like clothes for Vans, band t-shirts, and baggy shorts to match her newfound taste in music. Good Charlotte, Avril Lavigne, and Eminem. She even got a tattoo, telling the press my family thought I was going to be this weirdo satanic person. I got a crown when I was 15. That's my first. It was really horrible, but I'm keeping it as a memory. She was exploring everything she possibly could, saying I was trying to explore new things constantly. I'm into parapsychology and all the occult and magic stuff. So when I was reading those books, they thought I was going to be a Satanist. I don't like how religion divides people into groups. Growing up in her Muslim household, she was subjected to traditional double standards, especially when it came to boys, saying I was always told that because I was a woman, I couldn't do this or that, couldn't go out by myself. The first time I really felt free was when I kissed a boy. It was only later when I was exposed to the media that I realized the things I was fighting for were feminism. Her family saw her as a rebellious girl who had tattoos, listened to weird music, and dressed even weirder, but they didn't take her seriously. Every step of the way, she had to fight to not only be herself, but to assert herself in a household where she was the only daughter. Her traditional Turkish upbringing tried to dictate how she dressed and acted as a woman. So naturally, she did the opposite. She started expressing herself through her personal style. There was a point where she dressed very masculine. And then she started making her own clothes and crafting bows out of ribbons and selling them to friends. She began customizing anything she could get her hands on because it was only when she was making clothes that she felt she could truly be herself. And this is how she became known as the fashion girl. It became her identity, and clothing became intrinsic to her being. But it was at 15 years old when she realized what to do with her interest, her rebellion, and her life. After stumbling across John Galliano's work in Marie Claire, Turkey, and reading about how he attended Central St. Martin's, it was at that moment that Dilara knew what she needed to do: move to London and attend Central St. Martin's. There were simply no other options. And not shockingly, her family wasn't thrilled by the news. Her brothers even advised their father to forbid her from leaving, and because of this, she didn't speak to them for close to 10 years. With Dilara saying, they were a lot older than me and so restrictive. They believed girls shouldn't go out, told me what I could and couldn't wear. It wasn't about covering my head, it was about control. So after she threatened to run away if her dreams were denied to her, her father relented, with her saying they try to control me in different ways, but I found a way to get out of it all, because I've known what I wanted in my head since I was a really small kid.
The way I was brought up really affected my work, my personality in loads of ways, like coming from traditional background as well as, Islamic. And I had like really older parents. I looked like a weird teenager when I was in Turkey, in high school. So they thought I was going to be a fuck up. Like, this girl wants to go to London to study fashion. They're like, what the fuck?
And as will soon become apparent, Dilara Findikoglu does not take no for an answer. When she first applied to Central St. Martin's and went down for the interview, they turned her away, saying she was too fashiony, and there was simply no hope for her. However, determined to follow in John Galliano's footsteps, she went back the following year with a new portfolio and was accepted. She was 19 when she finally moved to London, and that's where everything truly begins. She spent her days immersed in photography books and her evenings at the Joiners Arms hanging out with Mimi Wade and Lily Banks. The excitement, newness, and rawness of London was palpable. With Dilara saying for a long time, putting clothes on made me feel strangled. I used to wear barely anything, a bodysuit and tights, always sheer. It wasn't to look sexy. It was that I felt comfortable not wearing any clothes. During her time at Central St. Martin, she interned for Mary Katrinzu, Jeremy Scott, and Yazbuki, until she landed the holy grail of internships at Margiela under John Galliano at the time of his debut couture show. About the experience, Dilara said, I had interned at a few other places before, but working with John Galliano was so different. He was so peaceful and down to earth. It gave me hope. It showed me that if I'm nice, other people will be nice too. It was such an influential internship that Dilara still considers John Galliano a mentor to this day. And she not only excelled at Margiela, but also at Central St. Martin's, graduating with honors in 2015. And after everything it took for her to get there, and graduating with honors, it's understandable why Dilara was upset when her graduation project was rejected from participating in the school's annual and infamous graduation show, an honor both infamous Central St. Martin's alums John Galliano and Alexander McQueen received. Willie Walters, BA course director at Central St. Martin, said, "The students that don't make the cut may well be disappointed not to be chosen, but we find that this makes very little difference to their employability. It also has no bearing on their degree markers, and this is made plain to the students. We educate 105 to 110 students. Up until 1996, all final year students showed their work, but when numbers rose, no one could take it all in. So now what they do is 3 pre-shows before the annual press show, and every student's work is assessed by examiners, and judges make the final recommendations on the 40 students who move forward. And while most students would idly accept this, Dilara didn't. With her saying, "I've been fighting for things my entire life. I put so much love and work into that collection. I came to London to follow my dreams. Then someone told me, no, I don't think so. When I didn't see my name on the official list, what was I going to do? Sit down and cry over my fate? No, I did something about it." And that "it" has been described as a guerrilla-style protest outside of the main press event. Dilara and a few fellow students staged a presentation in the Central St. Martin's courtyard. So as the press, photographers, and editors left the show, they were confronted with another fashion presentation, which became known as Encore. Hashtag Encore CSM was all anyone seemed to talk about on the internet. Dilara said, "My intention was to bring equality to the graduates. I thought our work deserved to be seen by the outside world, after a year of very intense work. It is not fair to bring fashion elitism into the game this early in our careers. That is not the way to teach young brains about the real world and expect them to achieve a successful future. That's why it was extremely important to her that there was no distinction between who participated in Encore, because equality was at the core of the event. To mention specific students went against the ethos of Encore, whose main goal was to bring everyone together." But for the context of this video, we will single out her collection, a collection that was unapologetically iconoclastic of her upbringing, inspired by Turkish carpet patterns, religion, and politics. With her saying, "In Turkey, we live our lives with politics. It's not like, oh, I'm really interested in politics. It's a way of life. You see all these bad things happening because of religion. It really affected me. And my graduation collection was about a religion that I created. And it was kind of taking the piss out of religion because I'm really against it. My government is trying to put religion in the center of politics." That collection was magnificent. But it was after graduation where Dilara really excelled. It said that she was tapped by Kanye West to work at Yeezy, but ultimately turned it down because she didn't want to be dependent on anyone. She wanted to be independent and challenge the industry's shallow superficiality, to bring awareness to things happening in the industry and to help future generations be less shallow. She wanted her work to be thoughtful, less surface level, and anti-mass production. With Dilara saying there was a shift in fashion since that time we all started being fashionable. It's less glamorous and luxurious now because of the problems in the third world, their massive production market, and the ambition of big conglomerates to produce more and make higher profits. I hope that I can help to reduce the massive production and exploitation of people in every field. Find a strategy to make a change. And in 2016, after many rejections, she found support from Ella Drawer and started her own label. Her work is fearless, it's provocative, created with powerful women in mind, women who inspired Dilara like Josephine Baker, Joan Jett, and Queen Elizabeth I, a badass of the 16th century who refused to get married because she didn't need a king to be queen, as well as Marlene Dietrich, who wore men's suits. And it's not so much because Dilara thinks women have to wear suits to look powerful, it's that Marlene Dietrich was different. And while Dilara was inspired by women, much of her work is actually inspired by her own interests as well. They can be simple interests like her favorite color red, which is quickly becoming a signature to Dilara Findikoglu because it's the color of fire, courage, and blood. And while some people might find the color vulgar, that's the reason she loves it, saying, "I had the sense that red was my personality. It has so many tones, and it is so difficult to get the right one, and it can mean so many things. It can mean love, passion, fearlessness. It is so bold, so out there. If you're wearing red, it's difficult to hide. I just want to be heard and seen. It's not a mid-tone, it's red. It's not black, and it's not white."
Yeah, I love red. Yeah, it's the color of passion, and I think it represents me really well because it can be cute, it can be dark, it can be sexy. It's like really out there.
And for anyone interested, MAC's Ruby Woo is her go-to holy grail for a red lip. But her interests can also have more depth, like her fascination with magic and alchemy, specifically with the alchemist Count Saint Germain, who appeared in the 18th century and was a nobleman who knew everything. He appeared in history 30 years after this, with many remarking how he looked exactly the same. And he would appear at two more points in history, and again, people said he always looked the same, which is why many believe he is still alive today. But our work can also explore and incorporate other interests like religious imagery, occult symbols, and Islamic mythology. Through the use of tattoos, social issues, feminism, goth culture, Victoriana, punk, rock and roll, and Italian horror. With Dilara saying, I generally look at religion, social issues, mysterious inventions, parapsychology, music, philosophy in my work. I like a mythical story, a shocking event, or anything extraordinary. In my work, there is a use of old objects that are repurposed and are given a modern perspective. I use unexpected and curious materials like chemically preserved flowers, ancient symbology, and crafts that belong to my personal background. I would like to think that my work is a part of me, so it consists of the same elements of my identity and character. Which is why escapism is at the core of her work, inspired by a world she created for herself as a child to get away. A child who didn't like what Islam was, who didn't like what religion was, and who thought this can't be real life. It's so boring. However, again, let's not be confused. No one is shaming Islam or being Muslim, especially not Dilara, because much of her work is actually greatly inspired by her home country and the religion she grew up with through her use of Islamic mythology and Turkish embroidery. Saying the Turkish embroidery and carpeting I use is all an interpretation of the sights and sounds of my country. These techniques came naturally as they were a big part of the everyday environment as I was growing up in Istanbul. As I grew up, I learned different cultures, arts, music, traditions, but I would still like to find a way to combine them all with my ethnic background. I feel like nowadays Turkish designers don't look back enough to these rich traditions, and they become lost trying to adhere to Western aesthetics. Everyone should all celebrate the richness of their own culture so they don't become copies of other people's work. Further saying, we used to tell a lot of ghost stories. Muslim people do that a lot. They like to tell stories about otherworldly Islamic creatures, and if you do wrong, they will come and get you. In Islam, they tell you about an unknown world, the world of spirits. They're called jinn in Arabic, and these creatures that live in other dimensions. I was scared of this world, but at the same time felt close to it. I used to wish I was psychic so I could discover more about it. And while she doesn't follow religion today, she is spiritual. She likes to read about things we can't see and live without rules, because while she does find inspiration from her childhood, she is also questioning it, and its very traditional and out of touch ways, supporting equality rather than gender domination, tackling female empowerment, sexuality, and waste. And that comes in the form of loving the female form and showing that the body is not a threat nor a form of provocation. But she does so in ways that don't feel so head on. She tackles these worldly issues in a mystical and fantastical way.
I used to be super upset about my generation because I was like, we don't have a specific personality or specific style, but I think that's what makes it really good. It's like mixed. You can take elements from everything. We're like mixed media. But I think the most important thing is to be brave. I think loads of people are missing that. We were still working in an environment where we have to fit in like in a certain way, but I think people should really celebrate their like differences, and if they feel different about something, I think that's probably why they're special in their own way. I think people have to like be more brave about those things.
With her saying, I think designers should be allowed to talk about whatever they want, because for me, it's an artistic process to design clothes, so we should have the freedom to express any ideas we might have through our work. I choose to raise my voice on issues that I think are important to be heard. It is a natural process for me to incorporate what's happening around us into my work because of my Turkish background, but I also think my work is timeless, and I would like it to stand above what the current system gives us. In the future, I really would love to focus on giving space for new consciousness. Dilara's work is always designed with a story in mind, imaginary worlds with self-penned characters and fantasy narratives. She creates characters, writes up little notes for them, describing who they are and even giving them names. And that's because for Dilara, there is no design without a story, saying it's about me trying to escape the real world a little bit, escape the things I don't like, that I don't want to see and don't want to live in. For Dilara Findikoglu, clothes are simply a byproduct of her storytelling. But she wanted her label to be different, to work differently, and that all started with how she ran her business, refusing to change or create all-around sellable work. She isn't interested in being sold in department stores, saying, I just want to go my own way. I really want to sell, and I want to see my stuff on people as well, but I don't want to lose the value of the garment. If you want to get something simple, you can go to the high-end street brands and buy them. She doesn't want to be just another designer, but to create something entirely new that goes beyond being a fashion designer. She wants to change the world.
I had to fight for loads of things to be able to study at St. Martin's to come to London. You can still see it in my work. In every collection I do, I always try to fight for something. Male and female equality is one of them. Research is the most important part of what you create, because without any knowledge and idea behind it, it's just another boring dress.
And now that I've sort of laid the foundation for who Dilara Findikoglu is and her work and her inspirations, I think it's finally time to talk about some of her collections, so let's get into it. Her first collection for spring 2016 was technically her first collection. However, Dilara would rather call it a capsule collection because it was created 2 months after her graduation show, with her saying, "After I graduated, I felt really empty. I just wanted to make something else." The story behind it was the change of roles between men and women. I take it all the way back to Adam and Eve. There was a twist. I gave the apple to Adam, making him the first sinner. In that sense, I portrayed women as the stronger players in the game. Visually, this represented male groupies running after female rock stars. In this world I create, women are the bosses in pinstripe suits, and men run after them. The collection married couture-level work with wearability. There were frayed ivory suits with beading, as well as strong motifs of rock and roll, heavy metal, surrealism, and the femme fetish art of illustrator John Willie. Most models' looks were paired with traditional heavy metal black eye makeup and rock and roll grunge. All in all, the collection was an extension of her graduation collection, about the pseudo-religion that appropriates the Garden of Eden, with Dilara saying, "I come from a country where religion is causing war, and despair, and sadness. I wanted to create a situation where religion was more about peace than about war." And in her spring 2017 collection, she focused on that yet again, with a collection titled Dear Past, Thanks for All the Lessons, which was a tribute for Silan Dogan, a woman who was freed from jail in Turkey after murdering her abusive husband in an act of self-defense. Dilara said that her home country is becoming more and more conservative, which feels alien to her, and that, like most other countries, violence against women is rarely taken seriously. So to celebrate Dogan's freedom, Dilara named the collection Dear Past, Thanks for All the Lessons, which was actually the phrase Dogan wore on her t-shirt when entering prison. Guests poured into a tiny theater-like basement of a Soho strip club with a checkerboard stage lined with candles and covered in ephemera of Renaissance still life. With this collection, Dilara explored how the female body has been restricted, treated, and represented in different cultures and societies, what they wore, what they were doing, and the limitations on their own bodies. And instead of dwelling in the bias, Dilara created a diverse and confrontational collection aimed at armoring women against the world. They primarily wore pink, a dominant color that was a tribute to girlhood and the subversion of it. Baby pink power suits embroidered with ovaries, 18th century lace-up corsets with stockings, and boxing shorts, which actually had to do more with Dilara's own life, as the previous summer she took up kickboxing after getting fed up with men catcalling her on the streets. The clothes were from various decades, eras, and periods of time, both restraining and liberating women's wear. From Tudor sleeves to Vivienne Westwood punk, Victoriana collars, and PVC boots, a collage of historically significant clothes. It was her messing around with stereotypes, making space for all that it means to be a woman and be in possession of your own sexuality. With Dilara saying, "I feel more comfortable when I fight for it, when it's not given to me. Everything I'm doing is questioning the system and going against it. I think that people are a bit scared to come near me." This same year in 2017, Dilara was nominated for the LVMH Prize for Young Fashion Designers, where she ended up a semifinalist, which is a huge nomination as she hadn't even been in the industry a year before being recognized for her work. But not winning didn't slow her down. Dilara just got right back to work on her next collection, her fall 2017 collection that was set in the library of Sir John Soane's museum to the top hits from Slayer.
My new collection was about my new world order. I just wanted to create my own future where there were aliens, there was gender equalities. Because I hate real life, I wish we had more interesting stuff, more magical stuff in it.
The entire show obscured gender, with Dilara creating a world without borders, a world where everyone is free, a planet that is host to new species, new genders, and new religions, a mix of cultures. That is why the show was a mix of tartan kilts, heavy metal chainwork, Victorian dress, and steampunk ephemera. Tailored suits in red velvet or pink pinstripes, covered in patches of beaded bleeding hearts, men wearing dresses and women wearing suits. In her spring 2018 collection set in St. Andrew's, Holborn Church, against alchemical symbols, Count Saint Germain and the elixir of life, to discover new planets, new species, to understand that brief time here just simply isn't enough. The show was divided into 7 groups: believers, rebels, thinkers, politicians, religious leaders, royals, and the god. Her show notes read, "You are beside me. Winter trees, a comrade to the world, a home. The TV is playing war. We hope for peaceful sunlight. A whole heart of blood resting on a whole heart of blood. The children are dressed in black. They are throwing petrol bombs at the embassies, throwing electric flowers into the graveyard of capitalism. The philosopher is counting the slow candles of the icebergs, noting how many summers we have left. She is brilliant in her sunlight hat. Her chest is a pyramid. The president has retreated to the golf club. He rules in half sentences. Coughing up the 1950s, his mind is a puddle where broken dreams sit on the rooftops of libraries. New weddings and empty churches. The minarets talk to the dawn before the sun lights up the city. The priests are whirling like dervishes in circles. They pinball off the walls, singing silence. Diana and the Swan ride an open-topped red London bus. The trumpets beside them play rave music. LSD trips to the sound brash bands. CCTV diamonds for Oyster cards. God is bored of us now. She sides with the animals and the weather, and they watch our digital alien rampage with cool, sad eaves. That has to be the sickest show notes I've ever read in my life. It was a show that was labeled a satanic orgy by Christian far-right groups. Dilara responded with, "Obviously I like occult symbols, but I didn't use them because I like doing satanic rituals. That's not what the show was about. It was about the illusion of the life that we're living. You are born, you study, you get a job, you get married, you have children and die. And this is what you do. It's so mechanical. This collection was about this illusion, to encourage people to see outside the bubble they're living in. I'm fighting to awaken people." Further saying, "I've seen people comment on my collection saying they're not feminist enough because the girls are in stripper heels and fetish wear. You know what I say? Leave the woman alone. Let her do what she wants. Let me do whatever the fuck I want." And that's exactly what she did in her next 2 collections, specifically her fall 2018 and spring 2019 shows. Her fall 2018 collection was inspired by the concept of the male gaze, as summarized by John Berger in his text on gender theory Ways of Seeing, which read, "Men look at women, women watch themselves being looked at." And with that concept in mind, Dilara flipped the script, creating the antithesis of the idea, saying, "Our hypnotic sister will command your gaze." A collection that champions femininity, negates the patriarchy, a female utopia where all women are accepted, with clothing that reflected that divide. It was romantic yet androgynous, with Victorian deconstructed dresses, abstract pinstripe suits that were cinched at the waist or spliced up the sides, skirts with thigh-high slits, and zodiac-embellished velvet blazers, embellishments that were over the top, somewhere above the stars, which included the use of natural stones, silver, and broken shards of mirrors. With Dilara saying, "I used to think that my ideal woman is a powerful boss woman, but as I grew up, I've changed my mind a little bit. I've realized that in order to be united, we all need to be accepted. There is no elimination." And her spring 2019 collection focused on that growth and new understanding. It was a look at personal conflicts in her life, 7 to be exact, that included sinful versus innocent, push versus pull, spiritual versus physical, future versus past, modesty versus provocation, natural versus synthetic, and good versus evil, all of which were displayed in individual rooms of an 18th century Gregorian home that was filled with grand chandeliers and paraphernalia that dated back 300 years. It was also the first collection she showed outside of London Fashion Week, presenting her haunting collection in October with the intention of creating change. With her saying, "It's important for a younger designer to try to experience new things. If you follow what everyone else is doing, there's no point in trying to be a young, innovative designer. That's the main reason why I wanted to present in a different time, in my own time. Maybe it will open a new way for young designers where we don't get lost between the stress and crazy pace of Fashion Week. Right now it's my time, my day, and I could present the way I wanted. If this was Fashion Week, people would probably have 5 minutes. But you know what? Making that dress actually took me 2 fucking weeks, and you have to look at it. All of my clothes are sentimental. I give a piece of myself into each piece, and that's why this show was by far her most personal." The first room had model Lily McManamy dancing in a dimly lit room in a bodysuit featuring coin embellishments that referenced her hometown of Istanbul. The conflict was push versus pull, her conflict between London and Istanbul. London is pushing her forward, but she was always pulling from her past, from her hometown of Istanbul. Her second room was spiritual versus physical, the concept of mind versus matter. The third room was natural versus synthetic, which was about her fight to be an ethical designer, how to choose between using plastic or leather natural materials. Then there was modesty versus provocation. That was about her constant battle with her background and her need to be provocative, with Dilara saying deep down, I know that the reason I do this job is kind of provoking against that modesty. While her fifth room was sinful versus innocent, a room that focused on child marriage. Models wore sugary pink and red dresses while playing with dolls. It also seemed to reference the in-between of girlhood and adulthood, except in this case, it is far more sinister, because these girls are trapped. With Dilara saying these girls are trapped in this nightmare of being an adult, yet they still want to be children, and the idea was to reference child marriages and people being pushed to get married, particularly girls in the Middle East, which also included a model's dress with a makeshift womb. Then there was future versus past. Dilara's conflict between being trapped in nostalgia but also being curious about the future, while the final room was good versus evil. In the room resided the devil and an angel, with a virgin bride lying on the bed dressed in a white tulle dress. In her fall 2020 collection, she was led to a deep introspection, psychoanalyzing herself into two sects, light and dark Dilara. And in true Dilara fashion, every look had a name. There was Gabrielle for Chanel, which was the first look in a crimson tweed skirt set with a logo belt. Sisterhood was a micro-mini iteration in pale pink. L'Enfant Terrible was a long-sleeve corset top with a low-slung skirt, which feels very McQueen-esque when you consider the fact that that was the name London branded him with when he was coming up as a fashion designer. There was also Mother, a blooming harness top in fuchsia with a red slashed maxi skirt. And as the show progressed, there was self-destruction, a ruched dress with a model holding a white cat. The idea was this crazy cat lady, which was Dilara's shorthand for madness. Borderline was a ruched black bodysuit. Power was a pale blue menswear suit. Insecurity was strips of silver fabric with floral appliques, worn with a bridal veil. Future came out right after in cuts of blood red fabric. Modesty and overthinking were mini poofs. One model wore an asparagus green headpiece, and the other wore the same headband in black and white, while Istanbul was the most radical look of them all, which was a photo print of belly dancing attire on stretched jersey. It was the first time Dilara had ever made anything so simple, so unadorned, yet the most impactful because it represented her past. And just when she was starting to get into the groove of things and making a name for herself, COVID hit. And as we all know, everything shut down. And it was during that time Dilara went home. She spent 18 months away, mostly because of a visa issue, but it made her feel trapped, saying, that's the feeling I had throughout my whole childhood and teenage years. I just wanted to get out, beyond the control of lots of factors like religion, like tradition, things that I couldn't change. And that is how her spring 2023 collection was born. A 4-phase collection: Trapped Girl, Chained Good Girl, the funeral of Dilara's own past, and rebirth. It was her journey to physical and spiritual freedom. Set in a 19th century hotel that was set to be demolished, and unlike previous collections, there was no music. Models came out in tulle, upcycled vintage Victorian silk brocades, recasted into bodices, menswear jackets that were worn, pulled down, and wrapped around the waist like chains, a corseted look in vintage Union Jack and topped with a crown of braids to represent Dilara's rebirth in London. As well, there was a mini pannier dress with plaited locks of hair that took 6 months to make. Some of the models were even adorned with coins and bells from vintage Aetolian pieces that you could hear as the models walked. And then there was my personal favorite, a voluminous feathered dress, which felt a lot like Alexander McQueen's Raven dress from The Horn of Plenty. Overall, the show was born from Dilara's feeling trapped, trying to lift herself from the burdens, the strangling feelings of modesty, and her will to destroy it. Her fall 2023 collection, titled Not a Man's Territory, was set in a deconsecrated church. Dilara was yet again inspired by women and their protests, specifically the protests in Iran over the assassination of Masha Amini, a 22-year-old who was killed at the hands of the Guidance Patrol officers, or Modesty Police, who arrested and beat her for not wearing her hijab in line with government standards, which resulted in women-led protest. Some of the most widespread protests since the 70s. Women were burning their headscarves and cutting their hair in the streets. Dilara was so inspired by their fight, saying something inside me really got triggered. The way they cut their hair in the street really inspired me. It was so powerful. That's what a real woman is. So her show was a collection born from pain, protest, and collective female rage. The color palette matched her furious rage: inky black, slate gray, fleshy nude, and red. And while red might be a signature to Dilara and her work, in this collection red took a deeper meaning. It's the color of blood, the body, and the color of existing. It's the color of life. Dilara further went on to say, there's always this conversation about a woman's body, how it should look, what we should wear, what jobs we should do. I can't express how angry this makes me. Her show was a call to all women who have been subjected to violence, who have suffered injustice, and to claim what's rightfully theirs. But I want to make it clear, Dilara's frustration is not with the hijab, or whether or not women should be wearing them, or if they are a sign of constraint. It's about letting women have the choice, allowing them to choose what they want to do with their own bodies, to let us decide. Questioning why is a woman's body a question of everything? Why is it exploited so much? It's always a topic. What should she wear? What shouldn't she wear? This is my little dance of revolution towards actually possessing your body back. And that is why this collection was Dilara's revolution. Hair was the focus, the emotional theme, with a swell of anger. Hair was seen throughout many of the designs, either trapped under tulle or plaited into skirts, and silver clips covered pieces to resemble armor. It was to symbolize her cutting her own hair and turning it into garments she wants to wear. Specifically look number 27, which was an embodiment of the entire show, the starting point if you will, with the model wearing a belly dancer outfit crafted from braided hair. Look number 4 was a tribute to Marilyn Monroe after Dilara saw the movie Blonde and hated it, finding it misogynistic, saying you exploit her, you victimize her, you do everything to make her look a certain way. So she created a version of Marilyn not owned by anyone, wearing a Hollywood-style white shaggy coat. While look number 8 was intentionally left unfinished, with the model kicking off her skirt mid-runway in a protest of modesty. But it was the closing looks that seemed to resolve the anger with hopefulness, like a gothic feather dress and a gray lingerie two-piece that referenced the phoenix and its rebirth from the ashes. But it also feels like a growth from her red phoenix dress from her spring 2023 show. And the show-stopping finale, which was a tight bodycon dress encased in 200 Victorian knives. It represented bravery, a defiant battle cry that was Joan of Arc reincarnated, with Dilara saying she's back for revenge, dressing as she wants, and she has her knives. And I can't help but feel like these two final pieces were a tribute to Alexander McQueen and all he ever did for women. Dilara's red phoenix dress resembles Alexander McQueen's The Horn of Plenty raven dress. It's dramatic. It demands to be looked at and loved. And instead of doing it in black, how he saw the future, Dilara sees it in red as a sign of rebirth. And then there's the Joan of Arc dress with 200 Victorian knives, resembling all of the work Alexander McQueen ever did that talked about Joan of Arc, that symbolized Joan of Arc, but that also was created as an armor to protect women. Anyway, the show twisted the elements of traditional and historical dress. It felt more like a performance than a fashion show, which set out to not only free women from their burdens, but to heal them. And while it was easily the most talked about show of London Fashion Week, the following season Dilara Findikoglu was noticeably absent. Due to cost and wanting to keep her business alive, Dilara made the tough decision to not show a collection, with her saying this wasn't something I wanted to do or a decision I took lightly. But the reality is we simply don't have the finances for a runway show right now, which was a very tough decision, but ultimately a very responsible adult decision that allowed her time to allocate her money in smarter ways to save her brand. With her further saying, to put on a show, I have to have a brand. The Dilara world and all its drama doesn't come for free. Everyone needs to be paid. With my shows, I take my brain out of my head and put it on the runway for everyone to see. If I have to do that in a half-hearted way, then all the other sacrifices stop being worth it. And that time away allowed her to refocus her attention on a grand collection. Her fall 2024 collection, titled Femme Vortex, where Dilara created an alternate reality, one unpoisoned by toxic masculinity, strict gender norms, and political upheaval. Except this time around, the show wasn't about politics. She didn't want to give it the energy or allow it to exist in her imaginary feminine reality. Dilara was shedding her layers, saying, I'm taking off the ideas that were put into my head when I was a kid. You have to cover your skin, cover your hair. It's kind of a silent protest to do the opposite of the rules that some men created for women. I don't like women to be put in boxes or to be limited. I want to be able to do whatever I want and be completely free in my own way. The opening look was female territory, and it laid the groundwork for the show. With Hari Nef wearing a pinstripe wool suit with a cotton shirt worn over a split skirt beneath corsetting, latex opera gloves, and a bow headpiece. Look number 3 was titled Man's License, which was accessorized with a tabloid newspaper that read, Oh my god, Dilara is doing a satanic orgy at a London church, which was a reference to her spring 2018 collection that was described as a satanic orgy by Christian far-right groups. Look number 20 was a top made of red and black soccer scarves, and the following look was a shrunken soccer jersey with a spiral comb bra detailing, which Dilara made with her family in mind, reminiscing about how her macho older brothers used to take her to football games when she was a teenager, to try and turn her into a tomboy so she wouldn't have boyfriends, which is absolutely kind of hysterical as somebody who played soccer and was a tomboy, obviously. That's so funny. That one made me laugh a lot. Look number 32 was titled Cleopatra as a CEO, which saw a model wearing a headpiece made of vintage silver keys that Dilara sourced from eBay, that was paired with a skirt made of twisted corporate blazers, while look number 12 was titled Fragile Ego. And then Dilara created Dressing for CCTV. After reading The Descent of Man by Grace and Perry, which talks about how we've raised boys the wrong way and now we have to change the way we educate them, Dilara created this look that draws on the tracksuits of inner city teens, saying men grow up in environments where they have to prove their masculinity and never show vulnerability. My previous collections were about fighting, about resistance, but I'm not fighting anymore. I wanted to express divine power somewhere beyond time, beyond reality, and beyond what is happening. And that's exactly what her final 2 looks of the show did. Question of Time and Waking the Witch were made of stiff fabric to appear frozen in time. Question in Time is one of Anglicanism, with white ribbons and lace to represent true innocence. While Waking the Witch describes a soul weathered by responsibility in a life she was forced to take on to ensure her survival, an all-black dress with a molted effect and feathered details. All in all, Dilara's work is armor, attacking and tackling the systematic rules created by hetero-patriarchal men. And after lockdown subsided, it really seemed like Dilara was back and better than ever. But she did hit another snag. This time, it was burnout. Something she had no control over. Something she had to succumb to. Saying, at Central St. Martin's, you felt bad if you weren't working all night. I loved studying there, but it was so toxic. I'm a workaholic. I ran out of money and I was too embarrassed to ask for help. The first 3 years were hard. So after this, Dilara began balancing bespoke orders and catwalks with small projects that cover rent and wages, which explains her collaboration with Heaven by Marc Jacobs, a collection completely inspired by her old girl school wardrobe, which included a skirt similar to a Topshop high school skirt she had that was so short her teacher called her mom to throw it away. A collection that was a dream wardrobe to her teenage self, as well as a collection she recently did with Kylie Jenner, which I'm not going to talk about.
Hi Days, this is Dilara. I'm so excited to be back.
Dilara explained to the press, I don't have a CEO or production manager. I do it all. One side of me is creative and the other is the businesswoman. I'm constantly shifting between them. I want this collection to be the last I do this way. And she is actually talking about her fall 2025 collection, which is titled Venus from Chaos.
So the collection is called Venus from Chaos. So it's like finding beauty through destruction. Like all of us in a way. And in the world, like constantly exposed to so much negativity. I'm in my definitely like very spiritual era, so like this is kind of reflecting that.
Dilara's show notes read, "We see that here and now, in this world, life exists under the conditions of an insurmountable regime of destruction, subjugation, cruelty, and control. Rather than fight to dismantle this agenda, for now we disengage and define our own. Rather than look outside to find a world that actualizes our full potential, we discover it within. They say that women are from Venus, and so, in an act of spiritual rapture, to Venus we return." After a seasons-long break, Dilara was back, breaking new ground with a cosmic rebirth that severed femininity from earthly constraints. Venus is about ascension, a celestial inferno with ethereal wisp of fur, veils, and armor-like textures. When the show opened, Laura Stone walked out in a corseted snakeskin gown, followed by corsets made of beach shells, braided hair, rows of safety pins, jellyfish dresses, and leather paired with faux fur shrugs. While one of the final looks was a tattooed bodysuit that was created with leather artisan Whitaker Malum and Dilara's boyfriend tattoo artist Jonah Slater. Slater hand-sketched the design onto the leather inspired by Maud Wagner, a circus performer who is reportedly the first known female tattoo artist in the US. The entirety of this collection was inspired by the Roman goddess Venus, whose likeness is a symbol of female liberation, but it also reflected chaos, the ways in which we respond to the constant evil around us, which is why Dilara had a message for all the models backstage. Papers that read medieval rock stars, moody but ethereal, don't give a fuck but hypnotic, kill it, own it. Because with Dilara's women, you can look, but don't you dare ever touch. Because if it hasn't been made obvious by now, Dilara isn't the kind of person who expects things to happen for her. She makes things happen. Her childhood as an outsider allowed her to explore every one of her interests. Nothing was taboo or excluded. A rebel her whole life, with her jet black hair, porcelain skin, and gothic look. I bet you wouldn't believe she is an avid Barbie collector since her childhood. There was even a point where she turned her entire bedroom into a Barbie dream house, creating clothes and building her own Dilara dream house.
These dolls here is a mixture of who I am. I wear a lot of fur and red. I wear a lot of Victorian clothes. That's me. I love Joan Jett, and like that's rock and roll side of me, and that's rock star me. And I love wearing like fetishy latex kind of clothes. That's me. And then 18th century, obviously, that's me, and that's like me glam rock. So like they all represent a different side of me.
Music is one of her biggest sources of inspiration. 80s pop, metal. For her, it's less about finding belonging in one world and more about immersing herself into new subcultures and how they express themselves. She finds inspiration through religion and occult iconography, even when she doesn't believe in them, because who cares? Her approach to fashion and design can be both personal and political, but at the heart of her work is protection. She uses clothes to express naivete, vulnerability, as well as defiance, and she creates characters that fight for freedom, for the body, for equality, and this can put her work under heavy scrutiny. Critics, press, and idiots alike can misinterpret her work, calling her a Satanist or claiming she's creating satanic orgies. Her work might make her a bit of a controversial designer, but she knows what she's doing. Not much unlike controversial designers John Galliano, Hussein Chalayan, and Alexander McQueen. Dilara Findikoglu's talent is undeniable. And it may come as no surprise that in 2023, when it was announced that Sarah Burton would be leaving the house of Alexander McQueen, Dilara Findikoglu's name was rumored to be in the running, until they disappointingly appointed yet another mediocre designer who has yet to make a name for himself at the house of Alexander McQueen. And I will say, I do think it's unfair of me and anyone else to compare her to John Galliano or Alexander McQueen. And yet, it feels only right, because she isn't a traditional designer. She doesn't design for everyone in mind. Her work is an art form. Her work is art. It's exact. Her silhouettes are exposing and confrontational. There's a precision to the chaos, a technical construction to the work, crafting to nearly perfect Parisian couture standards. And she doesn't care about becoming a billionaire or being bought out. In fact, she's not even concerned with dressing every celebrity out there, because it's been reported that the celebrities we do see wearing Dilara Findikoglu on the red carpet only account for about 5% of the requests she gets, with Dilara saying there's a lot of demand. but we are super selective. If they're not grateful or don't want to pay, we don't work with them, which again, I hate to do, but sounds like a very Alexander McQueen thing to say. Not many designers can say they would turn down free advertising, but Dilara Findikoglu has no interest in giving things away for free. She has a business to run, a business whose survival relies solely upon her. And I will say though, like most designers, Dilara Findikoglu isn't without her controversies. While she does a lot to speak up for feminism, toxic masculinity, religion, and so much more, there are a few questionable things that she has done, like a collaboration with Marilyn Manson, which I understand she was a fan of his music as a teenager, but like, we all know he's scum of the earth, right? Like, I don't need to explain further. As well, in 2019, she created a custom gown for Madonna, who wore the dress during her performance at Eurovision in the country currently committing an ethnic cleansing on Palestinians. And just recently, she collaborated with Kylie Jenner, which is a questionable choice when we ask ourselves, what has Kylie Jenner ever done for the betterment of women? Besides exploiting the Black community for her own personal gain and profiting off of small businesses by stealing their designs. Obviously, I think all of these were very bad choices, and I have no further thoughts on the matter. I don't know how we move on from that, but I'm gonna try. The world of Dilara Findikoglu is ever growing. She holds no limitations over where the company can go. Talking about expanding into a shoe line, furniture, and even beauty. Her work is about the beauty of her past, like upcycling and ethical sourcing, how her embroidery work is done by a women's charity in Turkey, but also about her and her future, which is in London, which is raw and provocative. All in all, Dilara's work is a disruption. Her being is a protest because people who don't belong are always the ones who leave a mark on this world. She's a fighter, a woman who stood up against the system and defied the odds. Her existence in the world of couture and fashion is a protest. And if you believe her existence is a protest, then she is absolutely a rare and dying breed. Because as Dilara said, well-behaved girls never made history. I want to provoke people, make them question things, and they do seem to be provoked. Okay, so that is seemingly all I have for you guys today. Yay! This video is really exciting for me. I think it's the youngest and newest designer that I've spoken about. I do hope you enjoyed today's video, or at the very least found it interesting. I am working through my next series, which I plan to have coming out soon. I think I might actually post one more individual designer video before I get into the next series, because I kind of want the series to go through the fall and end through the holidays. And as I said in my previous video, if there are any designers or houses that you want me to talk about, feel free to let me know. I'll always just put them on my list. So I think that's all I have to finish with. Let me know what you think in the comments about this video. I do try to respond timely. I also know I'm very bad at reading them when I post, but I do get around to them eventually. I'm doing the best that I can, I promise. Anyway, I hope you have a great rest of your day or night. I hope you have a very wonderful August, and I will see you for the next one. Bye.
I have to stand up for myself and say something. Does it mean I'm rebellious? Maybe.